Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rabbi Michael White, and I am the Rabbi at Temple Sinai of Roslyn. And it's an honor to welcome all of you to this very important session. I also want to give a shout out to our Adrienne Rubin, who is our Director of Lifelong Learning and Engagement, who will be our Zoom master for today. And I want to thank our co-sponsor, the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, and its exceptional and extraordinary leader, my friend, Dr. Farokh Khan. And I certainly want to thank Congressman Tom Suozzi and his office, most especially his partner, Yvonne Lee, who has been a wonderful, wonderful partner in planning this program. In fact, Congressman Suozzi and his office are responsible for bringing our distinguished guests here to us this evening. The genesis of this program really were the Olympics. Watching them and watching the beautiful spectacle, the amazing gifted athletes, and also being uncomfortable that China was garnering such worldwide esteem and attention, and the fear that China could use the Olympics to hide the atrocities that it is committing against the Uyghurs, as if they and their suffering do not matter in the world. And that's why we're here. We agreed that we needed to lift up their suffering and their cause. This is the first of many events that we will hold. In fact, Rabbi Alana Schachter, my colleague at Temple Sinai, tells me that on March 10th, we'll continue this work with Jewish World Watch. So this is the beginning of many. We're grateful that you're here. I also just want to say that we do this under the specter of war in Ukraine, and our hearts and our prayers and our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine tonight as well. I now want to just welcome and give the floor over to Dr. Khan so he can offer some words of welcome as well.
Thank you, Rabbi White. Assalamu alaikum, shalom. This idea, as Rabbi mentioned, was basically his initiative, and we connected, and after that, Congressman connected us with his staff, and one thing led to another, and here we are. And we are delighted to welcome all of you on behalf of the Interfaith Institute of Long Island, which is a gathering of the various religious groups. And we have a very distinguished board. Rabbi White is one of our board members of the Interfaith Institute. And I'm glad we'll be recording this event because I plan to share the recording with the many, many members from the various faiths who are tuned to the programs of the Interfaith Institute. I welcome all of you. And as I was mentioning before the recording started, I'm from Kashmir, and I have firsthand experience with oppression, with denial of human rights, and basically what happens when you start changing the demographics. And doing a little bit of reading about the Uyghur problem, I could really connect with it. And what I'm hoping today's event will give us something tangible which we can do, each person organizationally, which can be effective and will move the movement forward in United States and hopefully globally. So with that, I will conclude my welcome, and I look forward to listening very keenly and taking some notes and hearing your viewpoints. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Yvonne Lee, is the congressman with us?
Yes, he is.
Oh, great.
I am with you.
Oh, all right. Well, welcome, Tom, and thank you very much for this evening. So I'm not going to take, I have an introduction of yours that I was given, but I don't want to take time away from you, and you are no stranger to us in this community. The only thing I want to say, Tom, about you, and I've said this to you before, is that what I especially admire about you is that you fight for justice for people who have no voice. You fight for justice for people who are not a political constituency that would garner you any political power or campaign contributions. You've always done that. You did it when you were county executive, and you restructured and made more humane and fair and accessible the social services department, when you fought after the Great Recession to make sure that there was a jobs program for underprivileged kids, and now your fight for the Uyghurs. Jewish World Watch says you're their favorite member of Congress, and
Wow.
I think that's a sign of really an amazing leader. You're effective, but you fight the good fight. You fight for justice for people who have no voice. And I'm honored that you're my congressman, and I'm grateful that you're here with us tonight. So with that word of welcome, Tom, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Well, Rabbi, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for everybody coming together like this. And I'm grateful to my staff for helping to pull this together. And I'm thankful for our guest speakers. I hope you'll be introducing the panelists for me later on, Rabbi. But let me just say that, what's going on in the Ukraine right now really gives us a great insight into what a powerful person, an autocrat especially, or a powerful country can do when unchecked. I mean, it's really so sobering for all of us. And people are dying. Murderer is trying to take over another country, and people are fighting for freedom and democracy. And what is freedom and democracy but politics? And everybody hates politics. Politics, I don't like politics, it doesn't work. Everybody's fighting with each other. It's dirty business. That's the only way you get things done. And we need the people to participate in politics to make it work. So let's talk about the Uyghurs. Ever since President Nixon went to China, I'm not just so everybody knows, I'm the founder and co-chair of the Uyghur caucus. I was asked by some of my Uyghur friends, one of whom, Rushan Abbas, should be on the call tonight, asked me to take on this role. And Congressman Chris Smith from New Jersey is doing it as well as a Republican, a very big human rights activist. And I'm also was appointed by the Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, on the Executive Commission on China, which looks at Chinese human rights. And this Human Rights Commission that I'm also in Congress, that's called the Tom Lantos Commission, and our congressman, but he's a Holocaust. Civilization is paper thin. We are its guardians, and we cannot rest. So I want to thank the Interfaith Institute because they're great of the guardians who never rest for human rights and the fight taking place in the world, what we can do about it. So the more that China was exposed to us, the more they saw democracy, the more they would inexorably come closer to us. Social media, just media generally, that they'd have to become more like us. And that just hasn't happened. We saw it for decades with the Tibetan Buddhists. We see it now with the Hong Kong students. We see it with the saber rattling in Taiwan. But really, one of the most shocking to the conscience is what's happening with the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs are a Muslim ethnic minority of over 1.5 million people are in forced labor camps, where they're under constant surveillance. Those surveillance ideas were perfected with the Tibet really, but they've really gone steroids now. Constant surveillance, forced labor camps, forced sterilization, forced abortions. Muslims are forced to eat pork. They're not allowed to pray during Ramadan. Husbands are separated from wives, and wives are living with other Chinese nationals. Sexual abuse, torture, rape. So this has all been very, very documented by many human rights activists, some of whom are with you here this evening, that I actually helped nominate for the Nobel Peace Prize, the Uyghur Human Rights Program and the Campaign for Uyghurs. And we've been trying to call attention to this. We tried to use the Olympics. You know, the Olympics were a big show to try and divert from the human rights abuses in China. We think that very few people watched the Olympics this time around. It was, people really are hearing more about what the Chinese Communist Party is up to. And much like I think Putin is getting surprised by the public, certainly by the Ukrainians, but also by the NATO allies in the West, and our other friends of freedom and democracy are holding together with the United States against them, trying to fight this immoral and illegal war in the modern age of cell phones. I think that the Chinese were surprised by the education about their human rights abuses that were unveiled during the Olympics and will continue to be unveiled. So we have to do everything we can to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. One of the things that I'm very proud to have worked upon was the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which was passed by the Congress, was passed by the Senate, was signed into law by the president, says that any goods that come from the Xinjiang region, which is where the Uyghurs are from, are presumed to be made with forced labor. In the old days, you know, before this, you know, there were restrictions against using forced labor, but it was up to the U.S. government and others to prove that they were in fact made with forced labor. And it's incredibly difficult to do, you know, figuring out the supply chain, who bought it from who. You know, people were talking about doing soil samples and the test of genetics, and, you know, just much too much of a burden. The burden has been shifted. Any product that comes from the Xinjiang region is presumed to be made with forced labor. Now, that is a rebuttable presumption where the companies can try and say, no, we didn't actually use forced labor. But this is an economic hit to China directly, because China supplies a huge piece, I think it's 30% of the world's cotton products and cotton. And 80% of the cotton from China comes from the Xinjiang region. And a lot of American companies are buying products from the Xinjiang region. Well, this is a direct economic hit on China, saying under the Forced Labor Prevention Act, any goods coming from the Xinjiang region are presumed to be made with forced labor, so therefore you can't use it. And people say, oh, wow, that's going to make our T-shirts and our jeans and our clothes go up in price. Well, that's too damn bad. You know, we cannot be allowing these products to come out of Xinjiang, and we need to do more. We need to try and, the way the world is rallying to the side of Ukraine, and, you know, cutting off banks and saying we're going to embargo oil. I hope we do that in the U.S. Saying, you know, we're going to boycott other products. We're going to padlock the mansions of the oligarchs and seize their yachts. We need similar type of actions against the Chinese elite and Chinese products, so that they could get the economic message. So, you know, we don't want to go to war, but we need to be as firm as possible to hold them accountable. We're actually looking at some trade policy to put much more stringent requirements on Chinese trade policy, because the Chinese are cheating. The Chinese Communist Party is cheating. They're stealing intellectual property. They block access to their markets. We have to hold them accountable. And so we have to constantly think of new things to do and how to break through all the noise and hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. This is a long-term fight. The good people on this call, are aware of the Uyghurs. Hopefully you'll learn more about the Uyghurs tonight. It's reported on the New York Times and the Washington Post, and it's on television now and then, and people tweet about it. But the American people, the world community, really don't know about how bad it is for the Uyghurs and what the Chinese Communist Party is doing to them, much less the Tibetans and the Hong Kong students and everything else, the Kazakhstan and the Mongolians, so many different things that they're doing to abuse their people. So I want to thank the speakers that are on the call tonight. I'm going to keep on trying to raise my voice so that people know that this is happening, so we can rally the other members of Congress and the world community to hold the Chinese party accountable. You know, we read about these things. You're going to hear from some of the speakers tonight. These are personal stories. These are family members that are imprisoned, that, you know, the people that live here in the US and in other parts of the world haven't been able to contact their relatives. They're imprisoned. They're being tortured. They're being forced to violate their religion. So I want to thank Dr. Khan and you, Rabbi, and everybody with the Interfaith Institute for helping to bring this to everybody's attention. I'm sorry I can't stay on the entire call. I'm actually in the car right now heading to an event in Brooklyn. We all know that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So we just keep on fighting, keep on pushing. Things will continue to get better, but we cannot rest. The veneer of civilization is paper thin. We are its guardians, and we cannot rest. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. Rabbi, thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks. It's wonderful to have you. We're very grateful, very grateful. And travel safe. And I know you've got a few things on your plate, so we're really grateful that you joined us tonight. Before we continue with our next distinguished guest, I just want to mention that if any of you have questions, the way to ask them is to either post them in the chat or using the Q&A function. And then at the conclusion of our presentations, Adrienne will moderate the questions. But for now, it's my pleasure to introduce Aleem Saitoff, who is the director of Radio Free Asia's Uyghur service. During his tenure, which began in early 2017, Radio Free Asia's Uyghur service broke the story of the mass arbitrary detention of Uyghurs and has remained on the forefront of covering this human rights crisis since. Prior to Radio Free Asia, Aleem served as the executive director for the Uyghur Human Rights Project and was president of the Uyghur American Association. He has appeared on BBC, CNN, has been quoted in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, speaking about Uyghur-related issues. He has testified before the US Congress and has also briefed US officials on the subject. And it's my great honor and with gratitude to welcome him tonight.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. And first, I would like to thank Congressman Tom Suozzi's office for the kind invitation, and also this very important event hosted by Temple Sinai of Roslyn and the Interfaith Institute of Long Island. And first, I would like to introduce a little bit, I think, who Uyghurs are. I think that's very important because the word Uyghur, we say, Uyghur is who we are. And when we talk about Uyghur, in English, it's very hard to pronounce it, of course. You know, some people say Uyghur, something like that. For many people in the US, actually, they do not know what that means. Some people even think that's the name of a chocolate or something like that. But these are the people who live in what's now in northwestern part of China. The region is historically called East Turkestan because it's eastern part of the historic Turkestan. But the Chinese government, the Communist government of China, called it Xinjiang. Xinjiang in Chinese simply means new territory. Xin means new, Jiang means land. And the size of the territory is 1/6 of today's China. That is, if to compare a US state, that's 4 times the state of California. So you can imagine that's a very big chunk of territory. And it's a landlocked territory in Central Asia. It neighbors with at least 9 countries and territories. And it has enormous wealth, resources such as oil, gas, uranium, you name it. It's one of the wealthiest regions of today's China. And it has also, of course, all kinds of food that's grown in the region as well. And this area, historically, it's very strategic. Chinese government used this territory as a buffer zone, technically. And in 1949, because of a lot of history, Soviet Union supported China's communist leader Mao Zedong, and Soviet Union also helped Communist China to basically take over the region in 1949. After that, this huge territory became a part of China. In 1955, because the supermajority of the population in the region are the Uyghur people, along with other Turkic Muslim groups like Kazakh, Kyrgyz, and others, China had very little direct control, very little Chinese population. So they granted Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, although by name, it sounds like Uyghur people have the self-rule of the region, but in fact, it's very much like Tibet. Tibet is an autonomous region, and China, as you all know, promised Hong Kong one country, two systems up until 50 years. Now we see what's happening in Hong Kong, total crackdown of freedom and democracy, and those people who want to keep democracy. So that's how China treated all of these regions. But of course, starting 2017, China implemented a new type of policies. Human rights violations before 2017 was gross and massive. But in spite of that, after 2017, the Chinese government suddenly changed its total policy toward the Uyghur people with the appointment of Chen Quanguo, who prior to his arrival to the Uyghur region, he was a party secretary of Tibet. So as soon as he arrived, he hired more than 100,000 Chinese policemen to the region. He also set up police stations in every 500 meters. It's like around the 400 or 500 yards in a grid style of control to manage the region. Also, gradually, we see massive detention of the Uyghur people by the Chinese government in different towns, prefectures, and counties. And not only the average Uyghur people, but also the cream of the crop of the Uyghur people, the elites, the writers, the historians, the doctors, the scholars, the clergy. All of these people have been detained and disappeared. And also after 2017, China, as you can imagine today, it's so easy to communicate with all of the world, with your relatives, whether they're in Europe, whether they're in Israel, whether they're in other parts of the United States. It's so easy. You can use all kinds of apps to communicate with them, but all the communication were cut for the Uyghurs, and the Uyghurs overseas since 2017 have not been able to communicate with their loved ones at all. Many of their loved ones disappeared, many of them detained, and I think I don't want to give a very long introductory speech. I'd be happy to answer a lot of Q&A later, questions later, and I'm sure other panelists have other more important things to say at the moment. So I'll cut my remark short. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Setoff, for those important words and the context and the depth that you've given us about this issue. It's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Rushan Abbas, founder and executive director of Campaign for Uyghurs. Rushan Abbas has been an activist since her days at the University of East Turkestan. Since coming to the United States in 1989, she has been a tireless advocate for Uyghur rights. After Beijing accelerated the genocidal policies in East Turkestan in 2017, she established the Campaign for Uyghurs to advocate for her people among the government officials and lawmakers, interfaith organizations, universities, and think tanks, as well as the grassroots movements globally. In September 2018, her own sister, Dr. Gulshan Abbas, was abducted by the Chinese regime and illegally sentenced to prison in retaliation for Ms. Abbas's activism. Today, Ms. Abbas continues to advocate for the freedom of millions of Uyghurs by delivering remarks at national and international forums as a keynote speaker. She frequently testifies before Congress, and her writings have been featured in various media outlets. She received a Freedom Fighter 2019 award for her work raising awareness for the current Uyghur genocide. Recently, 2 US lawmakers nominated Ms. Abbas's organization, Campaign for Uyghurs, for the 2022 Nobel Peace Prize. Congressman Swazi referenced this as well, for its prominent and significant contributions to building fraternity between nations and promoting peace by defending the human rights of the Uyghur, Cossack, and other predominantly Muslim ethnicities that the Chinese Communist Party has targeted with genocide and other crimes against humanity. It is my pleasure to welcome you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Michael White, and the walaikum salam to Dr. Khan, and the thanks to Temple Roslyn for hosting this community event, and our longtime ally, champion of the Defender of Human Rights, Congressman Swazi and his team, and the members of the public who are here to listen to us and learn about this ongoing crisis. And also I thank my co-panelists here with me today. I am an Uyghur. I'm a mother and a sister to a wonderful and kind soul who's in China's detention center and paying the price for my advocacy work here in the United States as an American citizen. And she's paying the price with her freedom today. The human cost of this genocide is staggering. As my colleague Alim spoke eloquently and described the genocidal atrocities in my beautiful homeland, that's basically what's happening in 21st century to my people back home, the modern day genocide. You may have heard the Uyghurs before, and that the cotton of the Uyghurs' homeland picked by the Uyghur slaves could be in as many as 1 in every 5 garments worldwide. Or you may have heard of mass organ harvesting, or perhaps you have heard it in the context of the systematic sexual violence against women. We have heard from too many survivors now how the horrors experienced in the camps, and Uyghur women are targeted by the regime, forced to undergo forced sterilizations and have IUD implemented, and forced abortions. Families are separated and some never reunited. Uyghur women are forced to marry Han Chinese men while the government is incentivizing and offering those Han Chinese men money, housing, and the jobs to marry Uyghur women. If the Uyghur woman says no to such a forced marriages, she and her families will be sent to the camps as radicalized Islamic extremists did not want to marry non-Muslim Han Chinese men. So basically, Uyghur women's bodies have become the battleground that the Uyghur genocide takes place on. So today, my homeland is under the regime's oppressive police state, and cities are heavily militarized with soldiers, armed police security cameras and checkpoints on every corner and every street. Internet usage is heavily monitored, as Alim mentioned before, and your smartphones are used as a surveillance device against you and monitoring where you go, who you speak to, or what you are reading on. So authorities use this information to create a profile on you and use this to determine if you are a threat. Thousands of Uyghurs have been sent to concentration camps just based on the data provided by the Integrated Joint Operations Platform. And even more, the Chinese regimes going beyond the digital and electronic surveillance, the Han Chinese CCP cadres workers are dispatched to the Uyghur homes to live inside of the Uyghurs' houses, monitor and supervise their daily activities. This is reported in Chinese state media that 1.1 million Han Chinese was sent to Uyghur homes. And the Uyghur women are facing sexual abuse in their own homes. The issue goes beyond the borders of China and not only into the Uyghurs diaspora abroad, but also to the free-thinking societies, the NBA, the NFL, Hollywood, academia, media, and the others who also financially benefit from China and this genocide and making Chinese government's Uyghur genocide a profitable venture. It's not just simply an attempt to erase ethnic and religious identity or the future of the Uyghurs, but also an attack on the democracy and the freedom of our world here at home. So as Rabbi White mentioned, my own sister, who has been detained because of my advocacy work. Now it has been over 42 months that we have not been able to confirm her whereabouts and hear from her. And my sister, as you see her picture behind me, she's a peaceful, kind soul, a retired medical doctor. She has committed no crime, unless you believe that being a Muslim or believing any religion or being an Uyghur makes someone a terrorist, as the CCP outlawed all normal practices of the religion while calling Islam as, say, a mental disease. Upsettingly, we see the impact of China's genocide grow worse and worse. We have seen the results of this erosion today. The Uyghur birth rate has been helped. The Uyghur counties have been seeing no population growth. Uyghur children are taken away, sent to state-run orphanages. And China is not just getting away from this genocide, getting away with this genocide, but just being rewarded recently with hosting the Olympic Games. That's why it's so important. The panels like this give us opportunity to speak. And there's much still we can do to bring attention to the Uyghur genocide. The most important thing is to share information about this horror. Educate yourself, educate the people around you. These are the greatest crimes against humanity committed in the 21st century by the Chinese regime. So everyone must commit to change and stop this genocide. We hope to see this anti-democratic regime defeated once and for all. Each time we fail to uphold the promise never again, we allow the next atrocity to go forward. We must stop the cycle of genocide so it does not continue. If we do not, it could happen anywhere. Dr. Elie Wiesel, in his famous work, Night, said, quote, "There's a long road to suffering ahead of you, but don't lose courage." And he continues, "Help one another. It's the only way to survive." So hope, courage, and help from each of you and the humanity that you represent are the only things that we have left to fight onwards. I am fighting at the cost of my loving sister's freedom. So there is nothing in the world that would slow me down in this fight to stop this genocide. And please fight with me for the future of the free world that we are leaving behind for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you, and I am looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Abbas, and we will fight with you, and we will work hard and pray hard that your sister and all those who are in captivity finally receive the freedom and the justice that they deserve. So thank you. Our next speaker is Omer Kanat, Executive Director of the Uyghur Human Rights Project. Uyghur Human Rights Project is a human rights research and advocacy organization based in Washington. From 1999 to 2009, Mr. Kanat was senior editor at Radio Free Asia's Uyghur Service, where he covered the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, edited Uyghur language news, conducted exclusive interviews with prominent figures in Inner Asia, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and reported on breaking news around the world. Prior to his work at Radio Free Asia, he was editor and later senior editor at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Tajik service. Mr. Kanat helped found Uyghur Human Rights Project in 2003, as well as the World Uyghur Congress in 2004. He has served as vice president of the World Uyghur Congress since 2006 and chairman of its executive committee since 2017. Mr. Kanat, it's a privilege to welcome you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Assalamu alaikum. I'm very happy to be part of this panel. I would like to thank Temple Sinai and the Interfaith Institute of Long Island and Representative Tom Swazi for holding this important briefing. Thank you, Representative Swazi, for your strong leadership on the Uyghur crisis in US Congress. As the co-founder of the Bipartisan Congressional Uyghur Caucus, you are a hero for the Uyghur Americans and a hero for all the Uyghurs around the world. As a member of the Congressional Executive Commission on China for the past 4 years, you have been sponsoring some of the most important research and documentation on the atrocity crimes against the Uyghur people, which I will say more about in a few minutes. Uyghur Human Rights Project, as mentioned, based in Washington, D.C., is a research-based advocacy organization which promotes human rights of the Uyghurs and other Turkic people in East Turkestan. Since 2004, we have released more than 90 reports and briefings, which have been cited by major press outlets like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC, CNN, and many others. Uyghur people are experiencing a 21st century high-tech genocide, as previous speakers also mentioned. Over the past 5 years, the Chinese government has set up an Orwellian surveillance system to control Uyghurs through facial recognition, cameras on every street, and mandatory tracking apps on phones. This capability should be a concern to everyone, not only people living under Chinese communist regime. In 2017, Chinese government began rounding up ordinary Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in East Turkestan and throwing them into indefinite detention. Our best estimate is that 1.8 to 3 million people have been taken into the camps. In these camps, the women's hair was cut off. They had a starvation diet and almost no drinking water. They were given unknown drug injections and pills. They were subjected to many hours per day of forced indoctrination, forced to shout over and over again, "I don't believe in God, I believe in the Communist Party." People are tortured with electric shocks, beatings, and sexual assault. This is an industrial scale effort to crush and eliminate the Uyghurs as a people. This is why we are quite clear in our minds that these are concentration camps, massive roundups of innocent people based on their ethno-religious identity. There is also a massive program of state-imposed forced labor. It doesn't matter if you are a teacher or a farmer or student or a business owner. You're forced to work in a food processing, garment factories, and production of components of solar panels. 16,000 mosques have been destroyed and thousands of cemeteries bulldozed since 2017. People are sentenced to 10 to 20 years prison simply for praying. Hundreds of thousands of Uyghur children have been forced into orphanages and separated from their parents. These children will probably never see their parents again. But the Chinese government's pursuit of Uyghurs does not stop at China's borders. It is conducting a comprehensive program of transnational repression. UHRP has published 5 reports in the past 3 years alone on harassment of Uyghurs. That includes threats, smears, taking family members as hostage, black renditions, and forcing Uyghurs to become informers in other countries. We documented 372 known cases of refoulement, illegal deportation of Uyghurs to China, where they face certain detention, torture, or worse. Also, the Chinese government refuses to renew the passports of Uyghurs who are studying or working in other countries. This puts them in a completely desperate situation. They cannot extend their work visa or student visa. They cannot travel on an expired passport. They are mostly in countries that do not have a functioning refugee or asylum system. China puts tremendous pressure on the governments to return them to China. An independent tribunal heard 7 days of testimony last year in London on all these issues. After many hours of witness and survivor testimony, an expert analysis of hundreds of pages of leaked Chinese documents, government documents, the Uyghur Tribunal issued its final judgment on December 9, 2021. The tribunal found that this is genocide. The US government and several parliaments have condemned it as genocide and crimes against humanity. UHRP recently released a report on 312 prominent Uyghur intellectuals who have been imprisoned or disappeared in a targeted campaign of eliticide. This is, of course, tip of the iceberg. We also published a report confirming that over 1,000 Uyghur imams and religious figures have been detained or imprisoned, though we are confident that the real number is much, much higher than this. Another UHRP report covered in a Wall Street Journal exclusive found that the Chinese government has secretly given long prison sentences to Uyghur entrepreneurs and confiscated their assets. We were able to find cases amounting to tens of millions of dollars of confiscated Uyghur property. The US and other governments have taken some actions on the Uyghur issue, but it's not enough. It should be, they should do more than that. The CECC has taken the lead in the Congress. The CECC hearing on Uyghur forced labor in October 2019 led to the groundbreaking Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, introduced on a bipartisan basis by Representative Swazi and his colleagues. That bill was signed by President Biden on December 23rd and must now be implemented to prevent all of us from being complicity in the genocide by buying clothes or solar panels made with Uyghur forced labor. We also call on investment funds and universities to examine whether they are investing in the Chinese companies directly or indirectly supporting the genocide. We are advocating for a refugee resettlement program on humanitarian relief for refugees and stateless Uyghurs. We are asking the Congress to urgently pass the Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act, which would require the State Department to create a resettlement pathway for Uyghurs who are currently stranded in third countries. We are urging Congress to pass the Uyghur Policy Act, which will create a special coordinator for the Uyghurs at the State Department. These are just some of the steps that must be taken to respond to the genocide of my people. I can suggest more in the Q&A period. Thank you for inviting me again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kanat. This has been informative and heart-wrenching at the same time. Before we continue with the questions, I just want to lift up one of our participants, Jake Lewitt, who is really responsible for this program. He's a member of our community, grew up in our community, and called me one day and said, "What are we doing for the Uyghurs?" And so I want to thank him for his inspiration for this evening and for the work that will follow. I also want to mention again, March 10th, we will have our next program on this issue with Jewish World Watch, so we can continue the work. And I know there's some questions in the chat. Adrienne will ask them, but I would like to begin by asking all of you, I'd like us to come away from this session with some concrete obligations. So I'd love you to tell us what we can do as individuals and as communities to assist you and ally with you and partner with you in this work. So any of you, if you're just unmute, and please help us.
I can go ahead start with, as we mentioned earlier, and Alim Setov is doing amazing job leading the news network. But because of the information blockage and as well as Chinese government's disinformation and the false narratives, the many people in the world still don't know the details of this genocide. So it's extremely important to share the information from our social media, from our websites. And our colleague Omar Kanat here also mentioned few reports that they have produced. Sharing those reports, educating yourself and educating people around you is extremely important. And also, because of the corporate complicity, because of so many companies are still continuing to do business with China and making the Chinese government, enabling Chinese government's economy to murder more people. And the Chinese government is using that blood money they are making out of Uyghur slaves, tears and the blood and the sweats to buy out the silence. Where are the rich and the famous and the celebrities from Hollywood, usually so vocal against any kind of social injustice? When the perpetrator is China and the perpetrator has the money and the power, they all stay silent. So cutting off that power line, cutting off the Chinese goods, pressuring the organization, the corporations and the corporate USA to cut off the relationship with China and stop using Uyghur slaves for their supply chain. That's important. And also contacting your representatives, asking them to push forward the implementations of those legislations that's already became a law. There's the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act and then the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. But unless if we monitor and push these the act and the laws to make the effectiveness, it's just means nothing. So all these are very important, and as well as support the Uyghur organizations like ourselves. And you can donate going to our website, campaignforuyghurs.org, or other organizations, so we can continue our effective advocacy work. So those are just few things comes to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do any of our other panelists? Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add some points to what Roshan already said.
Mr. Kanat, I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, thank you. You can make a difference by stopping, of course, the flow of American investment dollars into the genocidal companies. Please contact your pension fund or retirement fund manager to say, please take all my holdings out of all the companies sanctioned for the genocide of the Uyghurs. Or you can tell them, take out all Chinese companies. I cannot allow my retirement savings to finance a genocide. You can go to the website called forcedlaborfation.org for many online actions to pressure these companies, especially the clothing brands. You can endorse, in addition to that, you can endorse the Coalition to End Forced Labor in the Uyghur region. UHRP is a founding member of the steering committee and a campaign for Uyghurs also on the steering committee. It has 400 plus endorser, and we are looking for more. You can Google the name of this coalition or contact, of course, contact me or Roshan afterwards, and my staff will help you. You can check the UHRP website under resources for a list of 57 Chinese companies sanctioned under the export ban and 11 companies that are already illegal for Americans to invest in. In total, there are 106 punitive sanctions, but it is still not enough. As Roshan also mentioned, you can also contact your friends and ask them to contact their members of the Congress to co-sponsor Representative Swazi's pending bills, the Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act and Uyghur Policy Act. UHRP will be organizing lobby days. If you would like to join, please email us. And also, if you would like to support Uyghur refugee families and our human rights advocacy work, we will welcome you to get in touch. We need legal help, financial help, also scholarship for young Uyghurs cut off from their entire families and other kinds of supports. Yeah, thank you.
And if I may, thank you very much, Rabbi White, for your excellent question. Actually, a little bit about Radio Free Asia. Radio Free Asia Uyghur service is the only Uyghur service in the world, in the free world. There is no any other Uyghur service, whether that's at BBC or Voice of America or any other big international radio stations. So we are the only one. And since 2017, we did a heavy lifting of reporting on all the important things that both of our colleagues just mentioned, whether the detentions, mass detentions, and even deaths. And we actually, Radio Free Asia actually was able to confirm the detention of Rushan Abbas' sister and later her 20-year sentence, and many other cases as well. And because of our credible reporting, the Chinese government couldn't debunk any of our reporting. It's extremely difficult, hard to find out what's happening inside of these camps, and especially to the millions of men and women locked up in these camps. And because of the work, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, just a week before he declared that China is committing both genocide and crimes against humanity, he actually commended RFA Uyghur service in his address at the Voice of America. So that's how highly valued by the U.S. government of our work. After that, after the declaration of genocide and crimes against humanity, the Chinese government is spending millions of dollars of disinformation and misinformation to justify its current genocidal policies, basically. And in retaliation of our work, the Chinese government detained and sentenced the loved ones of at least 6 to 8 of our reporters. They are still in the prisons. They are being sentenced. Some of them, they're still in detentions. Our journalists' loved ones in China, and most of them still have no communication, have no way of communicating with their loved ones for a very long time, for nearly 5 years now. So for Radio Free Asia, of course, we are a media organization funded by the U.S. Congress, and what we would like everyone to do is basically you can urge your members of Congress and also senators to adopt loved ones of Radio Free Asia Uyghur journalists who are either disappeared or imprisoned. For the past 5 years, we simply do not know what happened to them. They simply disappeared. And also at the same time, when you contact your members of Congress and the senators, to urge them to increase the funding for Radio Free Asia, and especially the Uyghur service, because we're a very small service. We only have 15 people working to cover this massive atrocity that's happening for the past 5 years. So 15 people, we only have half of them are reporters. So to find out what's happening, to dig up what's happening, to expose this massive crimes of the 21st century, the 15 people is very little people, very few people. We simply cannot we do not have the capacity to expose their crimes. We're only exposing the tip of the iceberg. But the situation is much, much more horrendous. And China just replaced the former party secretary Chen Quanguo last December, and with a new guy called Ma Xingrui, and he is kind of soft-talking party secretary. But when we closely follow Chinese government's media and the policies, the same old policies are still in place. Nothing has changed. No expectation of any day that China is going to stop this genocidal policies. It's only getting worse. So that's 2 cents I'd like to add to the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saitoff, and to all of our panelists. We're incredibly grateful to have you with us tonight. And if you would be willing to answer just a couple of questions from our attendees, we would really appreciate that. This can go to any of our panelists. So one has asked, have any predominantly Muslim countries, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, for instance, been vocal in challenging China, either economically or politically?
Go first, maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is a good question. The Chinese government is using, of course, heavy financial and diplomatic pressure on governments of Muslim majority countries to ensure that they stay silent or even support their policies. This is, of course, a very unfortunate situation. I don't know how to explain. As you know, as I said, 16,000 mosques have been demolished since 2017, and thousands of, religious leaders have been taken into these camps, and many religious leaders died in detention. But the Chinese government is also very successful, in suppressing news from reaching Muslim societies. This is another reason maybe Muslim communities in many countries doesn't really know what's happening. But actually, Muslims around the world are outraged once they know what is happening. Groups, for example, groups from 6 countries just formed the Muslim Coalition for Uyghurs on January 30th this year in Istanbul, Turkey. They are planning big awareness raising campaigns for Ramadan, coming Ramadan. They are raising money for scholarships for Uyghur students in other countries whose parents disappeared into the camps. So they are setting up briefings for the members of the parliament, and we can do more to help them succeed. For example, we need to put more information into Arabic language media and help them promote their work on social media. So although the Muslim majority countries, the government are still silent or supporting the Chinese policies, but there are movements among the NGOs in Muslim countries and many Muslim influencers started to speak up against the Chinese government's treatment of the Uyghurs. Yes.
Yeah, if I may add a couple of points. The simple answer is no. The Muslim countries all either silent or support China's current policies of the Uyghur people, unfortunately. Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman visited Beijing in 2018. He met with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And at that time, he basically supported China's policies against the Uyghurs. And the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan repeatedly told the Chinese government lied and repeatedly supported Chinese government's policies. Just a week ago, when he was asked about by CNN, Faris Zakaria asked him about because he went to attend the Beijing Olympics. And when he was asked about the Uyghur genocide, he basically told Chinese government lying, saying, "No, my ambassador went there, saw everything was good. There was no genocide. It's mostly American Western propaganda." And when you look at Turkey, which is much closer to Uyghur people, of course, as Omar said, the people, Muslims, organizations in the US, other countries, once they understand the situation, they are overwhelmingly supportive, but the countries, again, are not. Turkey, the government is not very supportive of the Uyghur situation, and the people in Turkey are also quite supportive. So the countries, Muslim majority countries, not a single country has ever spoken out, aggressively, against China. Turkey did a couple of times, then on and off, disappeared sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll conclude with this question. The United Nations was supposed to release a report on the Uyghurs in December, but still hasn't released it. What do you think is causing the delay, and what impact do you think that report could have to any of our panelists? Thank you.
I can just start with that, and then my colleagues can continue with it. I am extremely disappointed in United Nations. While the Chinese government is committing genocide and it's sitting on the United Nations Human Rights Council. It's like inviting the killer to judge his own trial. And as well as the manipulation in United Nations as the second largest donor, the Chinese government is basically calling the shots and what the United Nations does, or when they are going to release this report, or when they should silence. With trade threats and the power of the Belt and Road Initiative, and also sister city programs, seemingly is designed to promote cross-cultural exchange, but the Chinese government is using all their everything that under the possibility of the influence of the government, manipulating the entities like United Nations and the other international communities. The releasing the report would have been confirming the atrocities and the genocide, and the put some pressure on the Chinese government. But still, it's being delayed. It's extremely disappointing for us.
I went to UN to testify actually at one side event in April, I think, in 2018. At the time, it was a year after we started reporting all these mass disappearances, mass detentions. At the time, I had met with some officials from the UN High Commissioner's office. Basically, they asked me about my testimony. I basically told them the tragic events that were happening that we were reporting on at the time. They basically say that China is very powerful at UN. China is the second biggest donor after the US. A lot of positions are basically filled by the Chinese, and they decide so who takes what position. So UN can really do little to help with the Uyghurs, even though massive atrocities happening like this. And on Tuesday, actually, US Secretary of State Blinken, he spoke at the UN Human Rights Council, and he condemned China's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity. He also urged UN to release a report But so far, the UN High Commissioner, Ms. Bachelet, has failed to release a report for obvious political reasons under pressure from China.
Yes, I agree with the Alim and Roshan. So this, because of Chinese government's pressure, the High Commissioner on Human Rights delayed her reports. It should have, released actually in December last year, but then they told us it will be released in January. But also China is playing a game here. So they say that they will allow High Commissioner to visit and investigate on the ground in East Turkestan. Then they delay this. Of course, we are very disappointed. It should have been already released because all the evidences are there. So I don't know what the United Nations High Commissioner need more to know. And there is examples of many examples of other countries about other countries they released without visiting that area or that country. So we would we want to ask the High Commissioner to release it as soon as possible, because it will have a big impact, as Roshan also indicated. We talked with many of the UN committees. They are waiting for a report from the High Commissioner. Without High Commissioner UN report, these committees cannot act. So therefore, it is very important that this report be released as soon as possible.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I would love to turn it over to Dr. Khan for some concluding words, with our heartfelt thanks to everybody for being here tonight.
It was a very moving hour. I'm frankly depressed to hear the first-hand accounts of the atrocities that are going on as we speak. And it looks almost like a David and Goliath. A small group of people being dominated by a very large, powerful country, rich. And I'm so disappointed with the response of the Muslim majority countries who have taken the side of China and just overlooked the whole genocide that's going on. But again, I'm grateful and thankful to Rabbi White for initiating this conversation, and to Adriana for excellent logistic support. And it's a new beginning, and we are here, and inshallah, God willing, I will share this information that is recorded now with the people I know far and wide, several hundred folks on Long Island and beyond. And that's how, it's a little ripple in an ocean, but we have to do our bit and hope for the best. Thank you for the three speakers. Your presentations were very moving, very informative, and my personal thanks for your time and effort. God bless you. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to Congressman Swazi's office. And thanks to all of you. More to come.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.